today what we have is something we're going to discuss is about observability, and we are going to see what constitutes the observability, how we can achieve in .NET application, typically in API, and yeah, what components are involved, how they work, and what kind of typical setup will look like. And I'll also uh, show you a demo. So the agenda-wise, we'll discuss what is actually an observability. We have a demo project. I'll give you an overview of that, how it is working, all this component, and how you can add this OpenTelemetry in your existing .NET project. I'll explain these packages, NuGet packages that we use, some Docker files, and demo, and then finally any question and answer section we have. So start with this observability, talking in terms of software development. When we say we need an observability, or why we even need that. So basically it gives you an ability to gain the insights of your application. And to say it's just not application, it's also about the environment in which your application is running. So let's say you have an API and it is hosted on a server, and you also want to know the details about the server itself and how your application is behaving in this environment. So those kind of details that you want to see. And when you do the observability, this will give you a really good insight of your application, and it will help you troubleshoot and also improve the performance. So, and again, speaking to the observability, we mostly have three core components in that. The first one, I'm sure that most of the people are familiar, and we actually mostly rely on logs. When we say we want to have some troubleshooting or performance, we usually go for the logs, like Serilog or Log4net or some other library. So we can say we have at least one step in observability if we have logs. But the full observability is something when we have all these three components are all these three core components of observability implemented in that. So logs are like our error, warning, or debugging information that we have, that we typically put it in SQL Server, and we develop some UI to see that, maybe some alerting. So that is something we can also achieve using OpenTelemetry. The thing is that we may have to use different component for all these components. I mean, different libraries for that. And the second component is about metrics. So this matrix we can divide. I usually divide it into two parts. One is server matrix, and the other is application metric. Server metric refers to, let's say, CPU usage or memory consumption that is our application is doing on the server, right? And it keeps changing. It may be at one point of time your application is under stress, and you'll see a spike in the CPU and memory usage. And when there is no usage, it may be coming down. So you should be able to see the history and what's happening right now. If you want to troubleshoot so-and-so date and time, you should be able to go and check that. So those kind of details, if you want to capture, that's where this OpenTelemetry will come in help for you. The third is about tracing. So, and tracing is like, let's say it is more actually a granular approach, right? So when we say we have an API, so API is kind of request response. So we want to trace a request. So a typical request comes into an application. There is some middleware will be there. It will go to a controller. A controller will process it, and then it will generate a response, and again response will go through some middleware, and then it will be thrown out of your server. So all these phases that request goes through, you should be able to trace that. And it can get into very complex because we have span ID and trace ID concept in this. So we want to trace it and we want to see where the actual delay is happening. That's where this OpenTelemetry come into picture and help us. So the purpose of this presentation, I'll be just covering metrics. But yeah, we should actually, maybe in future, we should actually see logs and trace as well. So the next, let me see, share this OpenTelemetry setup in a .NET project. You see that we have this API, which is where our .NET code will rely. And when I say user, it's not the actual user, it's just API user. They send request and response. OpenTelemetry component that we add in our API, I'm not putting, as you can see, it's not just inside the API project, is something at the server level. So it actually is intercepting this request, and it is collecting data and all the metrics that it has, that it will set available for something called Prometheus server. So after collecting all this data, it will put it ready for Prometheus to collect. And Prometheus is nothing but a storage. And that we'll see in a later presentation. But the overall concept is that OT will collect this data. It doesn't do any kind of storage. It just collects and puts it ready for someone to grab. So in our case, Prometheus is going to grab the data. So, and then Prometheus again is just a database. It actually will not help if we don't visualize. So we use Grafana, which will again pull the data from Prometheus and present it to, and create a dashboard, and you can do lots of it. That you can set alerts and all this. So that's how this basic setup will look. So now let's go with this each component in the OpenTelemetry. So the first thing is OpenTelemetry itself. So when we hear about the documentations of OpenTelemetry and all this, we always come into with basic terms. The first one is telemetry. So telemetry refers to tele means, I think, remote, metry means measurement. So it is like you have an application which you are not in that server, but you are away from the server, but you can still do the measurement. And the second term we usually hear is that instrumentation. Instrumentation refers to a process of using some kind of tool, some kind of code in our application. And the purpose of this tool is to collect this performance or behavior data. Basically, it's just you want to do some kind of, nothing as a functionality wise, but at least just for the measurement data that you want to achieve. So what actually happens when you have OT? Like I mentioned, it just collects. I mean, it is generating some data. It's collecting and exporting it. So that you can use other kind of tools and technology to visualize or to store based on your need. So does this sound like a middleware from this? This image is mostly people think that it's middleware, but it's more than a middleware. It has its own APIs. It has SDK to do for logging or tracing and metrics and all these things. It has different kind of approaches. So it may be like come to your mind that how it is collecting the data. It's just middleware, like request comes in, it's collecting and then passing it. But there are some instrumentation is doing. So the first one is automatic instrumentation, where you don't have to write any code or any such thing. You just do some basic change, add some NuGet package, and you will have it. So it usually in where telemetry component will intercept and capture the data, right? For example, when we have HTTP request comes in to our .NET application, it can automatically intercept and it can start the tracing and it can gather the data. You don't have to make any change for that. But there is also manual instrumentation approach in the OT where as a developer, we can manually write our code using the OpenTelemetry APIs. And the main use case is for doing error handling, like custom error handling you want to do with that. And OT also work with the error detection and logging. That something again is comes into automatic instrumentation and exporting your data. So that is all included. You just do some configuration. You have to at least define where you want to store the data, and that's it. No code for that. So that's where the main concept for OT. Now, when we say OpenTelemetry, where you can run all of this. I mean, OpenTelemetry API, your Prometheus, Grafana, everything on your local. OT can also be used in your laptop, your machine, your virtual machine, or maybe we have some Docker or Kubernetes. It's available everywhere. That's its main advantage. Also, it can work with lots of other vendors. It just not depends on like .NET or some other application. It can actually have any sort of platform you can use this OpenTelemetry. So when it comes to inner working, OpenTelemetry has various components. So they have like receiver. So receiver's job is to collect the data from .NET application. So, and it uses different protocol, OTLP, OpenTelemetry protocol is used. You can also use file log to collect from a file. And there are different approaches where the receiver can actually pull the data from the application, or you can actually push the data in receiver. In our case, we have OpenTelemetry using OTLP, so we will be using the push approach. Then after you receive the data in OpenTelemetry world, what it will do is that it will do the processing. Now processing refers to, let's say you want to do a batch processing, right? So instead of collecting every time, it can actually gather some data and then it creates a batch. So then it can export it instead of sending each and every matrix and then exporting it. So you can ask them to use the processor. There are lots of processors. There is also some called deduplication, which will actually remove duplicate data that it is gathering from various sources. And the third component is exporter, where we are actually sending data. Let's say we want to send it to console, or we want to send it to Prometheus for storage. So, and again, processor also does the job of converting the data where you want to store. So let's say in our case, all the telemetry data it gathers, and we can say that, okay, we are pushing it into Prometheus. So processor will actually format the data so that Prometheus can understand. So you have some different data source available, then you can process it so that it can understand the data easily. So these three component, receiver, processor, and exporter, they work together. But to bind them, what we create is something called pipeline. So pipeline we can just like in Docker, we can set up a pipeline where we can say we have receiver and who is the processor, who is the exporter, and so we are basically binding them together using a pipeline, because in a complex application, you can have multiple receiver, multiple processors, and maybe multiple exporter, and may not be not be receiving whatever you receive. You may not be exporting it to all the exporter. You maybe want to select one exporter for one process. So you can all setup you can do using pipeline. And more than that, we have connectors. So connectors are used when we want to, let's say, we have created a pipeline and you want to do some complex pipe communication between the pipelines. So you receive some data from pipeline and you want to send it to another pipeline. So for more complex scenario. And the other component is also extension. So extensions are mostly used for if you want to implement your own some custom logic in there. So these are all part of OpenTelemetry collection. But these are all called OpenTelemetry collector configurations details actually. So then the other thing we have is about Prometheus, where we are going to store our data. Okay, and Prometheus will connect and it will pull from the data that is prepared by OT. Where it is? Sorry for that. So like here we discuss OpenTelemetry as received, process, and export. So once the export is ready, then Prometheus will come into picture. It will collect the data from the OT and it will put it in something called time series database. So just a quick background about Prometheus. It is developed in Golang language, and originally it was sponsored by SoundCloud. Then it is later adopted by Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So as you may be aware, CNCF is the entity which is also behind this Kubernetes, right? So after Kubernetes, OpenTelemetry is the second highest project for them. So I guess it clears the importance of OpenTelemetry for the dev world. So the main purpose of Prometheus is, like I mentioned, is storing. But storage is not just like putting some table. It is in time series database. So when I say time series, what I mean is that it is each and every data that it receives, it is out of the box that it will have a timestamp on that. And again, the purpose of time series is so that we can easily go back and see the trends. It will be automatically. It will also do auto purging. So if we have huge data, we can configure so it will automatically purge out some data. And mainly it is for aggregations and collecting details about the metric that we are sending. It can also have alerts, but they are core alerts. They are not like you can sending email or something. We'll use Grafana for the alerts, but Prometheus can also send alert to Grafana, and then Grafana can send email. So alerts, I mean, let's say we have some threshold of CPU usage going at some level, or memory is being consumed like 98%, then we can send an alert. So if we do that, then it's actually Prometheus, but send mechanism will be done by Grafana. So the problem is, I mean, it's not a problem, but the limitation is Prometheus is more it collects this data, and you can call this as a scraping. And through it is available to HTTP endpoint, which we can configure. And then we'll be connecting Grafana to pull this data and show to the user. So these are all about Prometheus. And yeah, it has more details in numeric, basically all the numbers data is there. That's the reason we have to go for Grafana. Prometheus can also create a dashboard, but it is not that user friendly. So that is about Prometheus. Again, Grafana is an open source tool, and it is mostly used for visualizing the data using charts and dashboards and other stuff. It is going to connect with Prometheus, and like I mentioned, the alert part is something really in the Grafana. And just so you know, these are all open source. OT, Prometheus, Grafana, these are all open source, so we don't have to pay anything for using that. That is also one more advantage in that. So now, how you can connect all these things? So when you say we have API project, right? We are going to start with adding some NuGet packages. So these are the packages we'll be adding. So the first one that in this is OpenTelemetry extension hosting. So this is simply used to kind of integration of OpenTelemetry to our .NET applications, kind of bridge. Since our .NET is a generic host, and OpenTelemetry can connect with that. So this is bridging between our application and OpenTelemetry. So, and then we have OpenTelemetry protocol. This is mostly used for exporting to have communication between within the OpenTelemetry collector. And Prometheus is again used here to say that this is our storage. This will provide a connection and to Prometheus itself. This rest of this instrumentation packages. So the purpose of these packages is to provide telemetry data. These are the actual data, like let's say when it is a process or even runtime. So this runtime will give you all the details about your .NET runtime. And then like process will give you your ASP.NET process that is running on your server. And HTTP can give you details about the HTTP request response, what's happening and tracing and all these things. And similarly, that goes for ASP.NET Core. It's all about measuring what you want to measure. So if we are actually going to measure these three core aspects of our application, right? So after you add these packages, you're going to mostly update the program CS, which I'll show you, to bind this using these packages. And that's it. And we are not going to change anything in our existing project other than adding packages, updating programs CS, and just a bunch of Docker files that I'm going to explain. So when we say Docker files, we have some of the files like Docker Compose. So this file will bind all the component, Prometheus, Grafana, and OpenTelemetry collector. And hotel config is about configuring the collector, OpenTelemetry collector, which is, again, like I mentioned, it receives data, it processes, and it exports. So all this connection and all the configuration for this is mentioned in this YAML file. And the other is about Prometheus YAML file, which actually sets up and configures the Prometheus. So let me go back to the Visual Studio and here. So this is the typical setup. It just in the program CS file, you can see I'm just using the what is available after you create a typical ASP.NET API project, right? It gives you this weather forecast. I added just this line to see throw some error. Other than that, all we have to do is here I'm just adding this new get packages, and in programs file we are using we are adding this line to add the OpenTelemetry. And right now, like I mentioned, our scope is only for matrix, so it is just with matrix. In matrix, what we are going to configure is resource builder is nothing but our project. We are adding meter, and I'm just giving a name of this meter, and then these 3 lines are for adding this instrumentation. That those are the packages that we discussed, right? And then this is an exporter. So in OpenTelemetry, like we mentioned, receive, process, and export. So this is where it is going to export at in the configuration. And this is the protocol. OTel is nothing but the protocol over which the data will be sent and will be set available for Prometheus. Yeah, so these are only the code change we have. Let's see, Docker compose. Now this may give you more idea on how it is working. So this is just like I'm setting a version, and I'm just setting a network. Network name is monitoring. So and the driver is bridge, but the monitoring is a network through which all this service is going to communicate, and volumes are the storage for Grafana and Prometheus. So in service, I think we have defined, this is my, okay, let me put it this way. So we have services configuration where the first one refers to the project API's name. And when we say it depends on hotel collector, that means it is going to start this hotel collector before it starts my project. And then we have build, and I'm just giving some context. And I'm also mentioning my Docker file. So this is just for the project specific configuration. And these are the port will be where my application is available. And I'm creating environment variable, hotel endpoint for collector. And again, like mentioned, network is monitoring to bind this thing together. So this is the first service. And the second service that will run is hotel collector. Now this is the heart of the application, which is actually doing the collection part. So I'm not like mentioning most of the details here, but this is I'm using the out of the box image here. I'm just defining in volume where the configuration is available for this, and these are the ports. I think 8889 is for the data for metrics. We'll see that this ports and its importance. And for hotel collector to run, we have config, and in that we have hotel collector configuration done. So if you see here, we have a receiver. So like I mentioned, hotel collector, the first component receiver. So it defines the protocol. This is OTLP, and it is using gRPC to set up communication at this endpoint. So this is where this data will be available for the next phase, and the next phase is processor. We are not going to put any additional component here. We are just saying that batch is a processor, so it will collect and it will do the process in batch. The third is exporter, and here we are mentioning that Prometheus is the exporter. So this tells hotel that okay, I need to convert the data they have collected in a Prometheus format, and this will be available at 889 port for Prometheus to collect. And this extension that we have is just a health check. It's just some kind of OpenTelemetry metrics that we can use for checking on the performance, right? And finally here, like I mentioned, is a pipeline. Pipeline, I'm setting it for metrics. If you go for, let's say, logs, right, or maybe trace, then you can here mention log, and then you can set a pipeline for that log. But in our case, we are just dealing with metrics, and I'm setting up the receiver. So OTLP is here. You can see it's a name processor, and then this is the batch processor for it, and exporter is the Prometheus name. So this is very basic OTel collector configuration. It's just like 24 lines, but it is actually bridging OTel collector Prometheus altogether. So this is about the YAML. Don't want to save. So OTel collector is configured. Now we are just setting Prometheus, and I'm giving a name and asking them to pull the latest image of Prometheus. And this is just mentioning which kind of what kind of configuration file will be available. etc is not right now in my machine, it's just config, but when it runs under container, it will go inside etc. So that's the reason we have Prometheus YAML file. And here, if you say we are just saying the scrap intervals, so every 15 seconds it will pull the data from OT collector. And in configuration, we are just mentioning bunch of job, Prometheus, where it is running on 9090. And this is node exporter. It's really not is used here, but node exporter is used to kind of show our machine details, like machine level details, server details, basically. And then finally, we have hotel collector. So this is how Prometheus knows where the collector is. And we are overwriting. So every 5 seconds, it is going to collect the data. And target, you can see 8889. So that refers to here in our main Docker compose. Yeah, this is. So 8889 is where the data will be available. And like 1313 is for I have to check why we have 1313, but it should be Docker compose somewhere. Yeah, so 1313 is for our extension data. So our extension is health check, and it's all the health check data that is available will be exposed to the port 1313. So that's the reason when we say hotel collector, and it is going to use all these ports and to collect the data. So health check data, it knows that I have to go here and pull these details, and it will collect all these details and export it for Prometheus. So again, 8889 is our metrics. So 8889 is our core metrics data, like CPU usage and memory usage and all these things. And 4.3 is our application endpoint. This is where our API is available. So this is how it is binding all the application in hotel collector service. The next is, like we discussed, Prometheus. And then final is just Grafana. I'm just, again, pulling the latest image, giving the container name, saying that run it on 3000 port so that we can see the dashboard. And the final is about node exporter. This is mostly for node level details in a container environment. So once we have all these things set up, and after we bind it, we can run this using So right now I'm using Windows machine, and you can see if I have a Docker environment, I don't have any image or any container here or at the same time right now. So from my project, I'm going to issue this command. So what this will do, it will use the Docker file, and it will pull the images of various components like Grafana, Prometheus, collector, and it will start the container with this services. So should not be an issue. Okay, so like you can see, we see the container, and in container we have different images running. All we have to do is that now we have to bind them so that we can use them. So let me start with the application. Um, so So this is our application, our weather forecast. So let me put some data in that so that we can get some data in our dashboard. Then we should also have Prometheus running. So 9090 is a port where Prometheus is exposing is, collecting the data and setting it available for the user application. So the next is about Grafana. Okay. So I'm logged in right now, but if it doesn't, it may ask you for username and password. In that case, admin and admin both are username and passwords. On local machine, it will once you enter the password, it will bring you on this screen. So as of now, my application is running. I have Prometheus and Grafana, but they are not talking to each other right now. So any data that I am throwing, it is getting into collector. Collector is there is a receiver. It receives this metric data. It is processing and it is exporting, and it is storing in Prometheus server. That's where it is right now. But we have not yet connected Grafana and Prometheus. So that's what we are going to do. Now, to do that, I also have one more endpoint, right? Duplicate, and in program, I have cause error. This is just to get some kind of error in the application. So it will just log some error. So in Grafana, what you can do is you will see some in dashboard. But before that, we have to connect to Prometheus. So in connection, in data source, we have this Prometheus available. So you can click that and you can change the name and look at this Prometheus URL. So we have this 9090. Don't use localhost, use Prometheus 9090. I'm setting all the authentication and this as it is. And when I click save, you see that it is successful available here. And so our Grafana has now connected to Prometheus. So we can create a dashboard and do some visualization. Now, the good thing is that Grafana gives you some dashboard out of the box. So you don't have to really go and pull the details and show them and do all the dashboard work. There are some dashboards available out of the box. The first one is hotel metrics that hotel is collecting. That's readily available. You see this, so it will show you the ASP.NET metrics that is produced by OpenTelemetry tools. So you can just copy the ID, and in here you can create new dashboard, and you can import it at the discard and load this ID. So this ID we receive from hotel, the Grafana itself. So it is pulling from the ID, it is getting all the details, what's the name, where's the dashboard. And here we can select the data that is Prometheus. This is available because we added the data source. That's the reason it is coming here. And what happened? Import. Yeah, so you can see that we have all these details right now available. This is all out of the box. And we can see some details available. So let's say if I hit some more time and they will refresh. So these are all the details available, and you can definitely configure, customize it based on your need. So let me add one more dashboard. Shows these are created by .NET team. Yeah. Again, I'll go to dashboard, new, import IT. So you can see this really nice UI is available out of the box. We really don't have to work anything. You can see it's already know that there was some error happen in that when we run the cause error application, right? So let's say we do some more. You can see it is already, yeah, it's already started coming up here as well. So these are the this is how we have achieved, like our application is running. It has these two APIs. Prometheus is here, and using Grafana, we have connected all these details available and shown it here. You can also get details about individual APIs. Not sure why it's not. I have to save the dashboard and in order to work. But there is one more node exporter if you want to see. So node exporter is more about your machine on which it is running. Dashboard, port, and you can create ID. So this gives you how much, what is the machine basics, like how much your CPUs, memory, how is the load going on right now, RAM, and all these details. It's just lots of information, which are all out of the box. So I guess you can appreciate what this three together is providing the details. It is more like we have an application, and so far we have been using log. So logs are like when you're not feeling well, you just check temperature or maybe oxygen, right? So these are very basic stuff. It doesn't give you any idea of what's happening behind our body when we are sick, right? So observability is more like getting detail, like you go for X-ray. So X-ray gives you more information of what's happening behind inside your body, maybe like MRI scan or CT scan or something like that. So observability is more like going deep into your application, and it can actually get lots of information and what's happening, and you can do lots of other stuff with this. Like you can set up alerts, and you can also set some provision for thresholds and other details for this. So yes, I think I covered. Yeah, this is what I have. If you guys have any question.
So I always have to use the Grafana and the Prometheus, or there is alternative?
So there are lots of alternative, but we mostly use this. There are other tools available itself in OpenTelemetry. I have not explored those options, but I'm sure that there are various options for this.
Yeah, can you show me how you integrate on the .NET one more time?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, so
It start with a program file where
yeah,
we had a NuGet and we had this configuration.
oh, so you just have to send it, and then that sends all the data, right? We
Yeah.
don't need to configure what to send. Okay. Runtime instrumentation, process instrumentation, core instrumentation, telemetry. Okay.
And I think this is the just because we are doing with metrics. If you're tracing, if you're logging, there are some additional NuGet packages like for Noge. For logging, we have Loki and yeah, likewise. So we add those and add configuration. Yeah, maybe logging is something you have to do in your application where you want to create a log, right? Log entries.
Yeah. Oh, so it sends to log analytics workspace directly.
Yeah.
Okay. Add endpoints API Explorer. What is the line number 24? What it's all about? Add endpoints API Explorer.
I think this is all out of the box. It's not something.
Oh, it was out of the box stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
We added.
Okay. Oh, that's for Fastback. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right. That's great. Anybody have any question?
Yeah. So on the Grafana, so I saw you picking different. I'm not familiar with Grafana. So you can pick different dashboards depending on the telemetry you have. Is that correct? They have custom ones already pre-made.
Yeah. These are provided by Grafana, and like .NET team, other vendors, they also create and set it available for you to import. So they have dashboards pre-built. But it really depends on what data source. Let's say we have, I think that should be Prometheus here. So like it gives you lots of information on and many of the dashboards available out of the box.
So do you know Log Analytics, Microsoft Azure Log Analytics or App Insight? Any chance?
Personally, I have not used Azure for logging, but yeah, there should be. Like you can, you don't have to Grafana, right? You can use Aspire. I think Aspire is one more from .NET, right?
The point I'm coming is, right, so we get all the metrics and traces right out of the box just by turning it on. What is the difference between, adopting this OpenTelemetry as a core programmatic way in the application versus asking those services to do all the tracings, right? So we host the web app, right? You turn on the metrics, you turn on the traces, it's going to collect everything, about the web app, versus when we have to use the OpenTelemetry SDK and then start using it. Do you know the difference of those two?
I mean, I believe that this OpenTelemetry is vendor agnostic, right? So it can actually it can set data for various other vendors available. If you are just in cloud and Azure, then it is fine. But if say we need to export data for some other application or some application development.
So who offers that exporter? Prometheus is OpenTelemetry format itself is it's configurable.
Yeah, it is configurable actually. But
the data of the format is configurable.
Yeah, I mean, for Prometheus, OpenTelemetry is providing up to the box. We don't have to do that.
Okay.
So it was somewhere in, okay, or that's basically in this hotel collector configuration where you are setting the exporter as a Prometheus. So from here it detects that all the data it is collecting, it is for Prometheus.
Okay. What is the processor? It says a patch, but there is no value after that.
I believe that it just batch itself is enough to indicate that it's a batch processing.
It is some sort of default batch process mechanism.
Yeah, yes, that's I mean default. Other processor like duplications are there. I mean there are 100 processors available, so they may have like maybe I think the batch when you give number it sets it's invalid. So there are options, but it doesn't have here. But yeah, you can configure all the deduplications and batching here.
Okay, that's good.